Hello everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SUNBEAM.com. Today I'm going to be using some products from the September 2023 card kit from Simon. Now this is the stamp set that comes in the kit. It's called Be Happy, and it has a stamp set building guide for one of the images on the back. So I will reference that when I get to the stamping. There's also this layered stencil set, which I won't be using in today's video, but it's super fun. And then there is the Criss Floral Embossing folder, and I will be using this one today. So I'm going to be creating 3 different cards. The first 2 are all about the stamping, so I'm going to get to it. I'm going to start with that layered image that I showed you on the back of the stamp set. So I'm starting out with Sunbeam ink, and I'm going to stamp the petals of the sunflowers first. And I'm actually going to stamp this a couple of times so that I can get a really solid yellow image. These stamps were brand new. I had not used them yet. So when your stamps are brand new, sometimes the ink can kind of pool up on the stamp itself and you don't get a really solid image. So you can double stamp, or even before you ink up your stamp, you could run your fingertips over the surface of the stamp, and that conditions it. I'm now taking SHERBET ink with a little blending brush, and I'm adding just a little bit of ink to the center areas of those flowers. And this is going to add some orange over top of that yellow that I've previously stamped. I actually did this twice just to intensify that color, and then I really loved how that looked. So now I'm going to move on to the actual leaves and stems for this image. And I referenced that image on the back of the stamp set a few times in order to get this placement just right. So I placed it over those flowers, and then I'm going to stamp the stems and leaves in PEARFECTION ink. And just like I did on the yellow petals, I'm going to stamp this portion of the layered image twice in order to get a really nice green solid image. For the last part, I'm going to stamp the centers in cappuccino ink. And this is a nice kind of mid-tone brown. It's beautiful. I love this color. And it's just going to fill in the centers of those flowers and finish off this image. If you wanted to, you could add some darker brown on the outer edges of these centers as well. I think that would look awesome. To finish off this card, all I'm going to do is stamp a greeting. This is a very simple card. It would actually be a really great card to make duplicates of and then just change up the greeting. But for this one, I'm using this grid placement guide, and it's fantastic for getting your stamped images perfectly positioned on your project. So you just place that down, close the door of your stamp positioning tool, and then you can peel off that grid sheet. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's a nice solid black ink, and I'm stamping my image, or my greeting I should say, right below my sunflowers. And this is going to finish off this card and give it a greeting. Like I said before, this would be great to swap out the greetings with different sayings that are in the stamp set as well. And this was all stamped directly on the card front, so this card is completely finished. So now I'm going to move on to my second card, and this one is actually 5x7. That first card was an A2 card, so it was 4 1/4 by 5.5 tall. But this one is larger, it's 5x7, and I'm starting out by stamping my greeting first. My idea behind this card was I would have the greeting in black, and then I'm going to start stamping yellow hexagon patterns, almost like honeycomb, around the greeting. And so I wanted to have that greeting there first, so I would make sure that there was space among all the honeycomb. I'm using Sunshine and Duckling inks from Simon. This is from the original ink line. The original ink line has some really toned back colors. The Pawsitively saturated inks are very bright and vibrant, so I wanted a more toned back yellow, so I went with Duckling and Sunshine, and this worked perfectly for this sort of two-tone yellow and gold look that I was going for. So I moved this honeycomb stamp all around my card, and when it was bleeding off the edge of the card, I just had to press a little bit more on the door of my MISTI to get that stamp to meet the paper. Not a huge problem at all. By the way, I'm using one of the Waffle flower grip mats inside my Misty for this portion of the stamping. And that just holds my paper in place while I'm doing all my stamping. I'm using that placement guide as well when I'm positioning the honeycomb stamps. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to have the stamp on that placement guide and you can sort of move it around and get it to just the right spot. And it also helps to align the honeycomb so that it's perfectly vertical, so things line up just a little bit better. So I went around all areas of my card front and just stamped in the 2 tones of yellow ink. Once again, that's Duckling and Sunshine, and just moved things around. I wanted to make sure that there were some gaps in the honeycomb, so I didn't fill in every single area. So I'm going to finish off this top corner, and then here I have my completed background. And I love how this honeycomb looks very organic and has those empty spaces. I took the solid black honeybee image from the stamp set, and I stamped that in that same VersaFine Onyx black ink, and then cut it out using some scissors with just a little bit of a margin around the outside. And these are straight cuts, so it's much more easy than if I had to cut around some curved lines. I put some foam squares from Simon on the back of my bee image, and then using my tweezers, I aligned it using a ruler right on top of my card front above the grading. I used that T-square ruler just to make sure that my bee image was perfectly straight. So here's the second card, also very simple and easy and fast, would make a great duplicate card for all that stamping. For my third card, this one's a little bit more involved, and I'm starting out with that embossing folder, the Crisscross Floral. I'm going to be running this through my Anna Griffin Empress machine, and this is the sandwich that worked for me for this folder. 1 cutting plate, a metal shim, and then the embossing folder. I used 110-pound cardstock for this texture, so I sprayed both sides of the cardstock with some water just to help it kind of form into that embossing folder, and then ran that through my Anna Griffin Empress machine. So here we are, here's that beautiful texture. It's not as deep as some other embossing folders, but I really love this dainty pattern. I'm going to set that aside to dry while I do some other things. I'm using the Nested Domed Arches dies from Simon, and I thought it'd be fun to have this shape right over this grading that's at the bottom of the stamp set. It says, "Today you're the queen bee, happy birthday." So I'm just trying out a few of those different dies to see which one is the perfect size, and I figured that this one was the one. So I cut that out and set it aside, and I'm going to work on my embossed background. We'll get back to that die cut here in a minute. Used my heat tool to speed along the drying, and now I'm going to use Duckling ink and a blending brush to bring in some color over this texture. It's really going to help that texture stand out, and the pattern is going to really be pulled forward, and you'll be able to see it a whole lot more. I thought maybe I would just have this yellow going around the outside edge, really emphasize the outer edges, but then I decided I wanted to tone it down a little bit. So I'm using the color Woodsy. This is one of the Pawsitively saturated inks, and I'm going to bring this brown in just on the edges. I'm going to darken up the edges and also kind of emphasize that texture just on the outer edge. So I'm bringing this around. I'm using a very light hand with my brush. I don't want to add a ton of ink all at once. So here's my background. It looks great, especially with that domed arch die cut on top. And now I'm going to work on the grading. So I'm going to put that domed arch in my stamp positioning tool inside my Misty, and I'm first stamping the grading that's going to go at the bottom. I stamped that in that same black ink, the VersaFine Onyx Black. And then I grabbed the individual bee image from the stamp set, stamped that, and then to finish it off, there's this little itty bitty crown image that is sized perfectly to go right above that bee. So just gave it a little bit of a crown. I adhered my textured background to a card front, And then I'm almost ready. You could leave the card like this, but I decided I wanted a little bit more shadow or shading around that greeting die cut. So I grabbed the same woodsy ink that I was using before, and I very lightly, very conservatively added some of this ink. I didn't want it to be really, really dark. So I actually started blending a little bit far away from the actual die cut, and then just let the very edges of my brush touch that paper. So it really lends itself to a very soft blended edge. I'm going to adhere this to my card front using some foam squares. And this is going to give it just a little bit of dimension, and it will also stick to that texture a little bit better this way. I almost left the card exactly like this, but decided at the end to add a little bit of an accent using a heart from the Mini Hearts Party die set. I just have a bunch of these hearts already die cut, so I pulled one out of my storage pocket. I put a little bit of adhesive down on some scratch paper, used my fingertips to take away some of that stick, and then temporarily adhered my black heart to the paper. I then used some Versamark ink over the top and sprinkled on some gold embossing powder. This is the gilded color from Brutus Monroe. It's a nice gold shade. So I wanted this heart to have a really glossy texture, really puffed up texture. So I actually repeated the embossing steps 3 times. So I've got 3 layers of embossing powder, and as I apply more embossing powder, it gets faster and faster to heat up and melt. So by the time I did this 3rd layer of embossing powder, I hit it with my heat tool and it practically melts immediately. It's really, really neat. While it was still warm, I bent back my cardstock a little bit away from those edges just to help it release from the paper. And then when I put some dimensional adhesive on the back of the heart, I stuck it to the pointer end on my tweezers just to have a handle. And then I heat set that one more time just to smooth out any of those ragged edges from the embossing powder. Sometimes when you emboss, when it's stuck to paper, it doesn't have a smooth edge. So if you just heat it again, it smooths everything out. I adhered that directly over the bee, and that finishes my 3rd card. So I have 3 very different looking cards for today, all using products from the September 2023 card kit. Make sure you check out the supplies listed down below, and you can click over and do all your shopping over at SUNBEAM.com. You can pick up this card kit, or you can subscribe to receive card kits in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video very soon.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at SimonsSaysStamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.